Hey everyone, I'm here today with Beckett Johnson, and I am going to let him introduce himself today and go ahead and share his TBI story.
Hey guys, I am Beckett Johnson, and my TBI injury happened 8 years ago, actually, April 14th. Yeah, 2014. We all know the date. I was actually in Charlotte, North Carolina. I don't remember my injury, so I have to go by third parties. But I was in North Carolina going to a storage facility to get a bed out because I was visiting from Canada. And my best friend showed up, pulled up in her pickup truck. I apparently jumped on the back bumper. She gunned it. I flew off.
Oh no.
Yeah, so I was in ICU that night with a 1% chance of survival. And my family was in New York, so they were called and notified that to fly down because they didn't think I would last through the night. And luckily, my wound stayed closed, so I cracked the toughest part of my skull, but it didn't open. So the back of my head was like the size of a cantaloupe.
Wow.
So they had warned my friends and family and stuff and said, we don't know if the bleeding's gonna stop, if he's gonna make it. And luckily the bleeding stopped. And of course, here I am. But at the time, I didn't have healthcare coverage. So that really put me in a whole different trajectory for healing and recovery. It really turned my life upside down. I mean, that's a question I get a lot when people are like, well, what is it like to have a brain injury? And it happened, I was 41 at the time. And I was like, well, imagine taking your entire life and just wiping it clean. Like who you are, what you can do. I didn't know what year it was. I didn't even like when they released me out of the hospital because I didn't have healthcare coverage. I was 2 days in ICU, 2 days in regular hospital care, but I was still didn't know who I was. I was still, like getting sick when the nurse stood me up and she's like, don't worry, we'll wheel you out with a bucket. You'll be like, it was like kind of like good luck. Don't fall, because if you fall, you crack the toughest part of your skull, you'll die. And good luck. So it really forced me to kind of go on this journey and try to figure out like, what is a brain injury? Like I didn't even know what that was, right? I had never really even heard of it until now. And I was only allowed 15 minutes of stimulation a day. So that included, talking, lights, TV, phone, 15 minutes a day, or they said I would do more damage to my brain. So I had to try to figure out like, how do I heal? How do I navigate this? And then how do I recover? And I was married at the time and I'm not anymore. And at the time, everybody I thought would be there left. And my parents lived in New York, so I couldn't travel. So I couldn't go up there. So I was kind of on my own to kind of figure this out. And it really just changed everything. I couldn't be as social and as active as I was. My friends weren't used to that. So I lost a lot of my friends. I couldn't do the job I used to do. I was a project manager, so that went away. So literally, I lost my marriage, I lost my job, I lost my friends, and eventually had to move back to New York and back in with my parents to get the MRI I needed to see the damage. But I tried to work with the legislature in North Carolina, actually. My friends threw me a fundraiser to see, could I get help? Because at the time I couldn't apply for Medicaid because North Carolina didn't extend it. And I was just told after like a year from the women in the legislature that you're just in the wrong state to have a brain injury. There's nothing we can do. So I had to move. So it totally changed my life because moving back in with your folks at the age of 41 is definitely an adjustment. I mean,
Okay.
I was so hurting that I couldn't really
Right.
like when I started to get social, I would talk to people like if I'm talking to you right now, maybe 20 minutes, and I'd be in bed for 5 days
Oh
because
wow.
my
Yeah.
brain just couldn't. You don't realize how much stimulation our brains get, from lights to sound to visuals to then you add the electronics to people talking to you or driving. Like it's a lot.
Hmm.
And our brain just can't, my brain just couldn't handle it. So, eventually I got down to like I'd only have to be in bed for 4 days and then 3 and then 2, but it took me a long time to get to that point. And they don't really explain it. They're just like, don't have stimulation more than 15 minutes. And it's like, okay, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? Like, just
Yeah.
don't understand all these things are stimulating your brain. And it's like, okay. And, you're so tired, my brain would just shut down. So people always say, like, when did you realize you had a brain injury? And it's weird to explain because I never like woke up in the hospital. I don't have a lot of memories of the hospital. I have flashes. I
Hmm.
didn't really wake up eventually and be like, oh, I've had a brain injury. You just kind of gradually come back to life and realize like things have changed. You know what I mean? Like I
Right.
can't can't do certain things. So it's a weird experience to explain. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard because people don't really how can you really understand it? And it's,
Right.
like even the things my parents would or my sister would be like, "Oh, we were talking to you at the hospital." I'm like, "You were talking to somebody, but it wasn't me." Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I wasn't coherent. I don't have any recollection of
Yeah.
conversation. So, I mean, I was very fortunate. I didn't have to like learn to walk or talk, but I did lose my taste and smell. I can't taste or smell anything.
Oh
And
my.
yeah, and I lost 90% of my hearing, so I wear a hearing aid in my left ear.
Oh my goodness. So
Yeah.
I guess COVID didn't affect you, did
No,
it?
I mean that's what everybody's like. Well, you lose your taste and smell. I'm like, well, I haven't had that for 8 years. So
Oh
I
my
mean,
goodness.
and it's funny because a lot of people, when it first happened, I'd always get the question, well, how do you eat? Well, I eat just like everybody else has to eat. I just don't enjoy it, or I don't, I
Yeah.
can't. But you still have cravings, so that's interesting because your brain still craves things,
Yeah.
but you can't satiate that craving.
That's
So it's really
crazy.
strange. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so crazy. I've never heard of that. Like that's so crazy.
I only know of two other survivors out of the hundreds I've talked to that have lost actually their smell but can still taste, which technically you're not supposed to be able to do that, right? If you don't have smell, you shouldn't be able to taste, but they can.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
weird.
weird.
Everybody's like, oh, it must be so easy to eat healthy. I'm like, it isn't because you crave like texture and you realize there's not a lot of texture in healthy food. I'll be
Yeah.
honest with you. And it again, you still have cravings. So like I liked
Hmm.
chocolate. So I still crave those things, but now I crave them and I can't satiate it.
Yeah.
So it kind of put me into we all kind of go through that depression, but that really kind of put me into depression too, because our society
Yeah.
revolves everything around food. Oh, that's a loaded question. Um, there's so much that people don't even know, but I think I wish people would understand that most survivors are doing their best. Do you know what I mean? We're trying.
Hmm.
We're really trying. And I think there's this misconception that we're either lazy or we use it as an excuse or, it's not really debilitating or we don't really have a disability. I mean, the list goes on, right? And the reality is we do. The majority of us, don't fall in that category of needing a caregiver, where we're extreme, thank God,
Right.
and I know there are some, but I think it's something like 91% of us don't fall in that category. We're actually what they call high functioning TBI survivors, like myself. So we look fine. And I would hear that all the time, like, you look fine, you sound fine,
Hmm.
but I wasn't fine. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it was very frustrating. So I wish people would take us more seriously and not be so dismissive and understand like there's something going on and nobody would choose to have these disabilities or choose to keep relying on this if we didn't have to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, okay. Best question for last. Beckett has social media. That's how I found him. So everyone needs to go check out his Instagram. Are you on Facebook as well?
No, I'm not on, I mainly stick to one platform, Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah,
So he is on Instagram and it's TBI Thrivers, correct?
correct.
And I'm going to let him talk about this because I think it's super awesome.
TBI Thrivers came about because I realized after going through some brain injury retreats and dealing with other groups, two things. One, brain injury groups don't talk to each other and they don't share information, which I don't really understand, but okay. And two, there was a missing component. Like once you've had your brain injury for a while and you realize like, okay, I know that I should be resting or meditating or yoga or right, positive thinking, yada, yada, yada. Now what? Right. You go to these retreats and you have this intense experience and you meet these other survivors and they become like family, but then you go back home and it's like, now what?
Yeah.
Now what do I do with these tools? How do I incorporate them into my life? So I realized, you know what, there was nothing out there that was serving really the more high functioning survivors in navigating their life beyond that, right? Like, so I started TBI Thrivers to do that, to create a community and give these people tools Like, yes, you may know meditation, but now how do I incorporate it into my life and what does it really do? And how can I make it a practice? Or like mindfulness, because you wouldn't believe how many people don't know the difference between meditation and mindfulness. You know, they think, oh, you know, I can only meditate by sitting on a cushion and stop thinking. First of all, that's never going to happen. So if
Yeah.
you know what I mean, if you think that's what meditation is, please, it's not. You can meditate 1,000 different ways and you're never going to stop your brain from thinking. So I started this group hoping that I could help elevate and take those tools and give survivors actual toolbox to move forward with their healing and incorporate some things. And so right now I've been running it for 2 years. We meet online every Monday right now at 1 o'clock. And I always tell them, like, this is our group, not my group. So every decision we make in there, we do it as a group. It's always, you know, rules and stuff. Everything stays within the group. And it's really formed this amazing community where they've learned to help support each other and then also helped each other move on and grow in ways that, you know, you're not seeing in other capacities. So I'm trying to expand it even more. So that's why I told you I'm doing research with other survivors and talking to them to see, like, what is it you want? What is it you need? What is it you can't find? And so I'm in the midst of doing that now too, to even elevate the group and take it even further to really help people, you know, navigate the later years. You're maybe not year 1 or 2 from your injury. You're more like, okay, how do I like get a job and deal with my injury? How do I work in my relationships and get an injury? How do I tell a new job? Do I need accommodations? Like, how do I write a book?
Yeah.
You know, stuff like that. So that's the
Right.
fun thing. I enjoy it.
Do you accept people just to join
Yeah.
your support groups?
Anybody can join.
Anyone?
You can go to my website and there's a link in my bio on Instagram. It says TBI Thrivers and you'll see live events. And I have everybody sign up every week. It's a come as you are, come in when you want. And I do it every week, A, so I know who's coming, and B, it's a good brain memory exercise to get you to go in and
True.
sign up every week. Yeah, to remember. So I send a little reminder out on Thursdays to come, but then it's up to you. And, you know, you can show up when you want. So everybody's welcome.
I didn't mention this in the beginning, but he's my first out of state interview. So this was so exciting. Thank you so much for doing this. So glad I got to have you on today. And I know everybody's going to be completely blown away by this interview because I was. So.
Thank you, Gracie. I appreciate it so much. And I love what you're doing for us. Keep doing it.